He will be taking the second half of the class.
Oh, he's here.
He's here. He's here.
Okay, can start, sir. Okay. So this is chapter 11. Actually, some of the chapters will be taken in the later part of it. Shravanath will be taken. That will be handled in later part. I'm handling chapter 11.
Handling chapter 11. This is page.
Quasi experiments.
No, madam. Ex post facto research.
Okay.
It is
Okay.
page
Sorry.
163 of our textbook.
Okay.
Okay. So shall I go into straight away into the subject?
Yeah. So that was everybody is okay.
Yeah, I'll proceed. So, see, I'll first start with the term ex post facto, what it actually means. In Latin, ex post facto means from a thing done afterward. That is, something happens and you try to analyze what has happened. Postmortem. That is, after it has happened, you try to analyze what has happened. This is actually ex post facto. In legal terms, this is actually called retroactive analysis. Um, so, for the simple example, would be see, for example, suppose Tamil Nadu passes that alcohol is illegal on, say, for example, second April. Now, the state cannot punish a person who has procured alcohol on 31st of March, since the legality came into effect only on 2nd of April. So this is basically ex post facto. It would be unfair to retroactively change the chances of the citizens. So this is an example of an ex post facto. So ex post facto research is basically it is a empirical investigation where the researcher does not have direct control over the variables. Since it has already happened, the particular thing has already happened. So there is no scope for the researcher to manipulate the variable. This is ex post facto research. Put it simply.
Is this going to be on any variable, or it is this only for the secondary variable?
Any variable, madam. Any variable. Independent. See, basically, independent variable will be your cause, and dependent variable will be your outcome, will be your effect.
Correct.
So, unless you manipulate the independent variable, you have no control over the outcome.
Exactly.
So we are not manipulating anything in ex post facto research.
Okay.
This is a research of what has happened, analysis of what has happened already. Okay. So basically, it is identifying the causative factors of the particular event. There are multiple in a textbook. Actually, there are multiple definitions of the post facto research. You can actually choose the last para. That is on page number 165. I think that is the definition I relayed. An ex post facto research can be defined an empirically based investigation which does not involve the researcher's direct control over the independent variables, which have already led to the effects which can no more be manipulated. This is the actual definition of ex post facto research. So it is mainly used in social sciences, where it is not possible to manipulate, practically not possible, or it is not socially acceptable to manipulate the variables. These places, they rely upon the ex post facto research. The fundamental motto is to identify the cause and effect relationships without manipulating independent variable. Instead, relying on retrospectively collected data. That is, after the event has occurred, we try to collect all the data as to why this has occurred, and then analysis. So obviously this is easier and less expensive compared to an experimental research. See, basically there are only two types of research. All the research which which has been discussed already, including survey research, everything, they all come under experimental research. This becomes another research which is post facto, ex post facto. So the fundamental motive is identifying the potential causative factors. The researcher actually tries to predict uh, what are all the causes for based on which this outcome, this effect has happened, which has already taken place. This is ex post facto research. In ex post, it is actually um, researchers keep on asking themselves, query themselves as to what factors might have resulted in this occurrence. See, for example, your investigation after this 9/11 attacks or around 26/11 November attack on Taj, Mumbai, all these things, after it has happened, analyze as to why it has happened. So this is basically what is called as an ex post facto research. I hope I'm clear here. Okay. See, so cause and effect relationship, because this is the term which often repeats in this whole chapter. I'll briefly explain about the cause and effect relationship. It is basically a relationship between events or certain actions where one event that is the cause leads to another event without the effect. Here, the cause is the catalyst or it may be a motive uh, which ultimately brings about a reaction. Uh, Whereas an effect is a condition, an occurrence, which may be resulted due to several causes. So this is basically what is called a cause and effect relationship. This relationship between the events or actions where one event leads to another event. Former being the cause, latter being the effect. Uh, so in our text, actually, they straight away go to a comparison between a ex post facto research and an experimental research. Um, so before that, there is an example wherein they are analyzing the factors of delinquency among among youngsters, teenagers. So delinquency meaning crime. Why meaning crime? So they try to analyze this. This is one example given in a text. Similarly, this pregnancy prevalent among teenagers. So it has already happened. So the society tries to analyze as to why this has happened. Poor parenting, drug abuse, um, improper monitoring, the I mean the so-called peer influence, tradition among the youngsters, all these things. So it has happened. So they try to analyze and try to rectify it. Okay, these are the examples given in text. So coming to experimental research. I'll quickly run down what is given in a text. See, uh, in an experimental research, um, actually you are actually manipulating the variables, as Madam already told in the previous meeting. The researcher actually tries to manipulate the independent variables in order to examine its actual effect on the outcome, the dependent variable. So the researcher can actually randomly choose a variable and choose the degree of manipulation. All these things can be done in an experimentation. Uh, it is subject to the degree chosen, subject to the inputs, the outcome differs. Whereas in an ex post facto research, the researcher has no option to manipulate the independent variable. It could have occurred. So this is the difference. Uh, but there is one danger in this post-factor research. If you can refer to page number 167, it is actually what happens when you try to analyze that, I mean, after an event has happened, that this is the cause, this is the effect. Simply because over time, see, for example, on 30th March, this has happened. 31st March, this has happened. So 30th March, the event that has happened on 30th March actually led to 31st March. If you are going to arrive at that conclusion, that is a danger. Sometimes factor, merely the temporal factor need not be the case. I'll just actually this is what is explained as post hoc fallacy. It is actually a bias. I'll try to explain somewhat about the post hoc fallacy. See, the term post hoc is again derived from Latin. It translates to something like after this, therefore, because of this. See, for example, I think Mr. Tendulkar, I believe, Tendulkar or Gavaskar, I don't know. He used to, in the commentary, he said that he used to prepare for the game and put some certain color of socks. If he wears that socks, they'll end up winning. Okay. So he says, I wore my socks, this, say for example, red socks, which is lucky for me. And so because of this, India won the game. But in actuality, it is not so. This is a typical example of a post hoc fallacy. I prayed for good weather, and so it did not rain. So my prayers influenced the weather. The stock market crashed after the president's speech. Thus, the speech caused the market downturn. All these are actually post hoc fallacy. You try to pin a certain cause to a certain effect, but in effect, the reasons may be different. I hope you got what is a post hoc fallacy. Now, moving on. See, the concept of post hoc fallacy actually tends to push the researchers where to completely, what do I say? One event may not be the cause for another the effect. It need not be. In our example, which was discussed in our text itself, they've said delinquency and parentage simply because they go together. We need not conclude that delinquency is effect because there was bad parenthood. It need not be the case. The team learned from his or her friends, his gang, peer group. That may be the reason. So this bias is certainly avoided post factor research. Okay. Yes, Mr. Arun. Yeah, are you trying to say something? Please mute. Yeah, yeah. So there are two types of ex post factor research. In our text, you may refer to page 167. There are two types of research. This is a correlation research and a criterion research. That is, correlation is also called as a causal research. That is, cause and effect. Our typical research. You compare two entities. The cause is, I mean, you after the event has happened, you try to pin the cause to the effect. So you try to understand how is that happened. Whereas a correlation research, it is actually you are identifying the antithesis of presently existing condition. So naturally, it involves collection of two sets of data. One which is available right now, which is retrospective, and one which was available earlier. The example given in the text is actually the causal factors for anger in school students, where anger is the outcome, the dependent variable, and the independent variable will be your upbringing, parental upbringing, low self-esteem, emotional competence, etc. These are the independent variables. What is between anger and other independent variables? The researcher can conclusively state as to what happened. This happened because of this. This result has happened. Okay. There is another type of post-facto research which is called the criterion group or a causal comparative approach. Here, actually, two entities are different where in a certain entity, some causes are there because of which an effect has happened. In another entity, in another sample, that cause is absent. That independent variable is absent. So you compare the outcomes. This is called a criterion group or causal comparative approach. I hope it's clear. Okay, so I'll now move to the yeah. As displayed in the slide, correlation study identify the antecedents of a present condition. It basically involved collecting two sets of data, retrospective data and the earlier data, determining the relation between the two data sets, identifying the possible causes for a current outcome. Criterion group studies involves, it actually aims to discover the possible cause for a phenomenon by comparing subjects. Only thing is that two subjects should exhibit a particular condition, but there need not be of similar causes. Now they try to bridge the gap between the descriptive research methods and the true experimental research. See, actually, as I earlier told, see, for example, let us take that socks example. A certain person put a socks in the India one. In another sample, the person does not wear socks and India one. Okay, so here it is absent. So it actually the research differs on the variable, which variable we are choosing, the independent variable we are choosing. Okay. So the key difference actually between the two types of research, the former, that is our actual correlational studies, the causal effect studies, actually only looks at the relationship between the variables, whereas the criterion group compares the whole group, and they need not be without a particular character also. In the approach, correlation studies examines only the associations, while criterion group looks for difference between the groups. I hope I'm clear, or can somebody interact?
Sorry, Anbu, I joined only now. Sorry.
Okay. Comparative examples you can see. That's what I said. For example, let us compare two schools. Okay, the results of two schools, exam results of two schools. Let's say in one school there is use of abacus. Okay, the other school they don't use abacus. So we are going to compare the results of these schools. This will become your criterion group comparative study. Okay. So the next difference lies in the analysis. The correlation study strictly uses only statistical tools. statistical correlation techniques. I think when have we already dealt with standard deviation, mean, median, everything?
Yes, I did when I was in MBA.
Yes, ma'am. Bear with me.
During our 10th standard, we studied
15 years before.
Yes, yes. So, standard statistical tools which is used for correlation are used in your correlation studies. Awesome. Whereas in criterion group, it is actually all the tools which are used for comparison. Your pivot method, your what we use in Excel, everything which are used for comparison can be used in analysis in the criterion. But both the designs are useful in our expert perspective research because we are basically trying to trace back what are all the causes and we have to report conclude that these are all the causes. We have to rectify this. So both are useful. Okay. So there are some advantages and disadvantages with regard to your exposed factors. See, before that, there is a small, in page number 168, they are basically trying to narrate what are all the characteristics of an exposed factor research. They are all the compilation of whatever I just told, I discussed. Okay, so the advantages and disadvantages of exposed factor research. See, wherein the variables cannot be manipulated, these exposed factor research are totally relevant and they are widely used, especially in psychological evaluation. You might have seen in many videos where the individual comes and says, I reacted this way to a particular stimulant, I reacted this way. So they'll go back from the current position as to why the particular individual reacted that way. So it is very much useful when you are trying to analyze the cause and the basis effect. What causes what? So it is very much useful in that research. This is not possible in an experimental research because in experimental research, at any point of time, we are trying to vary a particular individual variable and then try to compare. The outcome we are not sure. At that point of time, we are not sure. But here, the already outcome is given in a post-facto research. So this is an advantage. The post-facto research can be used as an exploration tool for a variety of studies, not just psychology. You can conclude many things. You can infer many things. This method actually gives a sense of direction to a hypothesis. Once you state the hypothesis, you are actually going to check our standard scientific approach. You are going to check if it is true, if it is false, whether this happens or not. So experimental research, post-facto research is actually research done after the event has occurred. So it is a very good source for your hypothesis, both checking the current hypothesis and introducing new hypotheses, so that they can be experimented at a later point. It is less time consuming and economical, and it gives a chance to the researcher to analyze based on his personal opinion and conclude. Disadvantages. So obviously you don't have a control. That's already happened. You don't have a control. So you cannot manipulate the independent variables. It cannot be used in an experimental point of view. The post-facto research. The researcher may not be able to provide a reasonable explanation for the relationship between the independent variables, since he has no control. There's the problem. Then one cannot know for certain whether the causative factor has been included, because there may be several causative factors for an event. Okay, so there might be a bias of interpretation. This post hoc fallacy I told about, post hoc assumption. That bias may pronounce, and our conclusions may not be factually correct. And there is only limited sample. See, you are basically analyzing an already happened event, so the sample is limited, and it constantly it fails to single out the actual factor which has led to the event. Okay. Then we go about the requisites for inferring relationship. There is associative variation, systematic order of events, and absence of other causes. That is, see, if you are going to relate two different variables, there must be a relationship between them. Otherwise, there is no the researcher cannot come to a conclusion. So this associative variation is very much essential. And then the systematic order of events. That's what I already told. The temporal point of that is time when this happened. That is very much essential for us to come to a conclusion. And obviously, if we are not unaware of the complete data, complete knowledge of what has happened, our final conclusion will be wrong. In medical field especially, if you are not going to predict or conclude that this has caused this disease, you will be wrong. So it's very crucial. And finally, our text speaks about the steps of an ex post facto research. I've briefly, basically, you have to identify the problem, exact problem. Then you have to go about existing research, all the existing research or similar studies, which can help us in analysis. Maybe in the future we can predict and try to prevent it. And then the formulation of hypothesis. As I told you, the experimental research is a rich source for hypothesis formulation. And then designing the approach, how to move with the hypothesis in the future. And then validity of the research. The researcher can get to validate the significance of the research because he already knows the outcome. If it has happened, and he knows the outcome. And interpretation of our conclusion based on the hypothesis. After interpretation of everything has concluded, we can interpret in such a way as to try and recommend some things, or we can the variety of possibilities. Okay, I've quickly tried to run down the chapter. I hope it was clear and covered everything. I've seen our previous question papers. I think 5 more questions are often asked in this area. That's it. Other than that, some maybe they can ask define post-fact fallacy, define the cause and effect relationship. What is an ex post facto research? These questions are often repeated. That's all. So that's all to do this with this chapter. If you have any doubts, you can please ask. Anyone?
book rate பண்ணிட்டு சொல்றேன் சார்.
Simple தான் மேடம். It is just simple. Basically, the idea is ஒன்று நடந்ததுக்கு அப்புறம் அதை we are going to analyze and try to identify the causes. அவ்வளவுதான். Simple. இதை வச்சு படிச்சீங்கன்னா தெரியும். ஒரு 4-5 terms தான் வருது சாப்டர்ல.
மொத்தமே அவ்வளவுதான்.
Anyone can easily interpret it.
Comparative study one, correlation study one.
Yes. Yes.
I just need to read it because yesterday after finishing that I was about to prepare the PPT for the developmental psychology. So I அப்படியே stop பண்ணிட்டேன் research methodology.
Yes, sir. Yes.
That is why.
If anyone else has anything, you can say. Otherwise, Suleiman sir can start.
Yeah.